It's a common moment, one we've all seen before. A dog injured and alone, struggling for survival on the side of the road. But what if, in that moment, the life of a billionaire innovator could be changed by the simple act of stopping to help? The quiet hum of the electric car filled the otherwise still air as Elon Musk drove through the sleepy streets, his mind racing with thoughts of upcoming meetings, emails, and innovations. A typical afternoon for someone like him, whose life revolved around deadlines, technology, and goals. The world was full of progress: SpaceX rockets to Mars, Tesla's energy revolution, and groundbreaking ideas at every turn. But as his car moved down the empty street, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was always more to do, more to build, but at this moment, he felt the weight of it all, the constant pressure, the never-ending demands. In the midst of this reflection, a movement on the road caught his attention. It was a dog. Not just any dog, but one that had clearly been through hell. It lay on the side of the street, its body battered and bruised, its fur matted with dirt and dried blood. Elon's heart skipped a beat. There was no mistaking it. This dog needed help. His first instinct was to keep driving, after all. He was on a tight schedule and he had no time to stop. But as the car slowly passed the injured animal, he felt a pull in his chest. The quiet street, the warmth of the afternoon sun, and the vulnerable figure of the dog lying there, it was impossible to ignore. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop, the wheels screeching against the pavement. Without a second thought, he opened the door and stepped outside. The dog's once vibrant eyes were now clouded with pain, and its breathing was shallow, each gasp a reminder of its suffering. Elon approached slowly, trying not to startle it. Blood dripped from its side, and the deep cuts on its legs told a story of hardship. This wasn't just a random injury. This was the result of neglect, possibly abuse, and it was clear the animal didn't have much time. In that moment, the weight of Elon's fast-paced world seemed to fade. There were no meetings, no calls, no rockets or cars to build. There was only this, a moment of raw humanity, a life in desperate need of compassion. As he knelt down beside the dog, he saw the extent of its injuries, its fur clinging to the open wounds, its body trembling with fear. Elon's hands shook as he reached out, gently speaking to the dog in a calm, soothing voice. He wasn't sure if it could hear him, but he hoped it might. There was nothing more he could do here except act. But acting was what Elon had done his whole life. Whether it was building reusable rockets or pioneering electric vehicles, he was used to taking the reins in moments of urgency. Yet this was different. This wasn't about technology or progress. It was about empathy, about the simple, unspoken connection between human and animal. The urgency of the situation hit him hard. The dog's breathing was growing more erratic, its body visibly weakening. There was no time to waste. He needed to get the dog help. He looked around. There was no one else in sight. No sign of an owner. No other cars on the road. Just him, the dog, and the realization that the next few moments would determine whether this animal would survive. With a surge of determination, Elon lifted the dog into his arms, careful not to jostle it too much. Its body was limp, heavy with the weight of its pain, but it was alive. And in this quiet, still moment, that was enough. Enough to make Elon stop everything he was doing. Enough to make him realize that sometimes life wasn't about the things we build, but about the lives we touch, the choices we make when no one is watching. He rushed to his car, carefully placing the dog in the back seat. His mind raced. He had no idea where the nearest animal hospital was, but he would find it. The need to help this creature was all that mattered now. As the car sped away, Elon couldn't help but reflect on the strange, unexpected turn of events. The quiet road, the solitude he had been enjoying moments ago, had shifted into something entirely different. For all his accomplishments, his dreams of sending humans to Mars, his mission to revolutionize Earth with sustainable energy, none of it seemed to matter in this moment. What mattered now was this injured dog, and whether he could save it. In the blink of an eye, his day had been altered forever. The car hummed softly as Elon sped down the quiet road, the engine's low purr a constant reminder of the busy schedule that awaited him. The dog, still trembling in the back seat, breathed shallowly, and with each labored breath, Elon felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. In his mind, a quiet battle raged. There was no time for this. The meetings, the calls, the endless to-do list. It was all waiting. He had a responsibility to his companies, his team, and to the millions of people depending on him. Time was money. Every minute spent here was a minute lost. His life was a race against time. A race that didn't stop for anyone, not even for a stray dog on the side of the road. But then the thought lingered. What if this was my moment to do something different? His mind flashed back to his busy morning, to the emails he had skimmed but not truly read, to the presentations he had approved without ever really absorbing. He had become a machine, someone who moved through life at a fast pace, checking off boxes without really living in the moments between. And yet here he was, faced with an opportunity to make a choice. A small moment, yes, but a meaningful one nonetheless. As he glanced at the rearview mirror, the dog's eyes met his, and for a brief second, there was no mission, no agenda, just two living beings in a moment of connection. The dog wasn't concerned with Mars or electric cars. It just needed help. His heart wavered. The choice, while simple in its core, was far from easy. He could continue driving. He could ignore the situation and go on with his life. After all, the world was full of suffering. Countless animals were abandoned, injured, and in need of care every day. The world didn't stop for them. And he certainly couldn't stop for every single one. Could he? But then another thought surfaced. What if I am the one who can make a difference? His life had been built on making bold decisions. From dropping out of school to founding companies that changed industries, he had never been one to shy away from difficult choices. And here now was another one that was in a way more personal. The world would never know the choice he was about to make. It wouldn't show up in the headlines or the quarterly reports. No one would applaud him for it. It would be a quiet, private decision, an act of kindness that he would have to carry with him, knowing it was the right thing to do. But what if it's not enough? What if I fail this dog? Elon's mind churned. What if the dog didn't make it? What if the trip to the animal hospital wasn't fast enough? He couldn't help but think of all the people he had let down throughout his life, those who had believed in his vision and hoped he could change things for the better. Could he live with the failure of not being able to save this one life? He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. There was still time to turn around, still time to make the right choice. But what does it really mean to make the right choice? He realized that the answer was simple, though not easy. The right choice wasn't about efficiency or progress. It wasn't about who would notice or how it would look on paper. It was about being present in the moment, making the decision to act out of kindness, empathy, and a desire to help, not because of the recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. His eyes softened as he glanced once more at the dog, its fur stained with blood and dirt, its body bruised from whatever hardship had befallen it. The dog had no voice, no one else to turn to. In that moment, Elon realized that it was not just about saving a dog. It was about reawakening a part of himself that had been buried under the weight of his ambitions. The part that believed that kindness was just as important as innovation. The part that understood that in this world, the small, seemingly insignificant acts could have the most lasting impact. Elon's hands tightened on the wheel as he turned the car toward the nearest animal hospital. There was no going back now. The decision had been made. As the car sped through the streets, the weight of his choice began to settle in, not as a burden but as a sense of clarity. There was no grand purpose here, no higher calling beyond helping this dog, but that in itself was enough. In a world that moved too quickly, this was the rare moment where slowing down had meaning, where taking a detour could save a life. As he pulled up to the animal hospital, Elon opened the door and rushed around to the back seat. The dog had grown weaker, its head resting against the seat, its breathing even more labored. He gently lifted the animal into his arms, feeling the frailty of its body. And he rushed inside, his heart pounding. Inside, the staff sprang into action, assessing the dog's condition with calm professionalism. But even as they worked, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this decision had changed something within him, something that had been lost in the noise of his busy life. As he sat in the waiting room, waiting for the doctors to provide an update, Elon leaned back and closed his eyes, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had chosen to help. He had chosen to act. And in that moment, he realized that maybe, just maybe, that was all that truly mattered. Elon rushed through the glass doors of the animal hospital, his heart racing as he cradled the injured dog in his arms. The dog, limp and unresponsive, had barely moved since they had arrived. Elon's mind raced. Was it too late? Had he waited too long? But there was no time for second guessing. His only focus was getting the dog the help it needed. The hospital's staff immediately recognized the urgency in his eyes. A nurse hurried forward, taking the dog from Elon's arms with a calm professionalism that belied the urgency of the situation. "Put it on the table," the nurse instructed, her voice steady despite the panic that crept into Elon's chest. Elon watched as the dog was carefully placed on the examination table. The sight made his stomach twist. The dog was a mess, its fur matted with blood, its body bruised, and the unmistakable scent of death lingered around it. The injuries were severe: deep gashes on its side, a large cut along its hind leg, and several smaller puncture wounds that likely came from a collision. Its body trembled slightly, a sign that it was still alive, but barely. The nurse and the veterinarian quickly went to work, applying pressure to the worst of the wounds, their actions efficient yet filled with urgency. Elon stood frozen for a moment, watching them do their best to stabilize the animal, but his mind was elsewhere. His thoughts were a jumble of fear, guilt, and helplessness. How had this happened? Was the dog abandoned? Had it been struck by a car? Was it too late for any of this to matter? I should have acted sooner, he thought, guilt gnawing at him. But then the doctor spoke, drawing him back to the present. "We've stabilized the bleeding for now," the doctor said, her voice calm but firm. "But it's going to be a long road. The wounds are serious and we need to do surgery." Elon nodded, his gaze locked on the dog's face. The dog's eyes flickered open briefly, gazing up at him with a mixture of confusion and pain. A small whimper escaped its throat and Elon's heart ached. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I won't leave you." The nurse began prepping the dog for surgery, and the sense of urgency in the room grew palpable. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the team worked quickly, calculating every movement with precision. Elon paced back and forth, his mind unable to settle. Every moment felt like it could be the difference. Between life and death for the animal in front of him, the weight of the situation was crushing. And yet, in that moment, Elon felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The dog was vulnerable, fragile, and it needed someone to step in. No distractions, no timelines, just the life of another creature hanging in the balance. With every moment that passed, his resolve grew stronger. He couldn't let it slip away. The dog, though unconscious, continued to make soft, labored breathing sounds. Elon knelt beside the examination table, his fingers brushing gently over the dog's fur. The pain the animal must have been enduring was unimaginable. The blood that stained its fur wasn't just from the injuries, it was the symbol of a life in peril. A life that, despite everything, still clung to hope. The veterinarian noticed Elon's presence and gave him a soft, knowing look. "You did the right thing bringing it in. We can help." Elon nodded but couldn't find words. His gaze never left the dog. He had made a decision to help, and now he was committed to it. Every second felt like a delicate balance between hope and despair. He couldn't afford to give up on this moment, no matter how impossible it seemed. Minutes later, the surgery began. The room fell into a quiet rhythm as the team of doctors worked quickly but carefully. Elon remained at the edge of the room, unable to tear himself away. Each breath the dog took felt like a victory, but it wasn't enough. Elon knew the road ahead would be long. The dog wasn't out of danger yet, and there was no guarantee of success. But still, Elon couldn't look away. He had made a promise to this animal. He had taken responsibility. The dog might not understand the significance of what was happening, but Elon knew. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about something deeper, something personal. He had given up so much of his life to his work, his dreams, his ambitions. But this moment was pure. It was a decision made not for any grand reason, but for the simple act of kindness. As the surgery progressed, the dog's vitals seemed to stabilize. The heart monitor beeped steadily, and the blood loss slowed. Elon's chest tightened with each beep, hoping it would continue. He watched the veterinary team's focused faces, their expert hands working in sync, and a sense of awe swept over him. They were all fighting, not for glory or recognition, but for the life of this one dog, a creature that just moments ago had been abandoned and suffering. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the overwhelming tide of emotions. His mind drifted to his own life, the relentless pace, the constant push for more, for better, for faster. He had sacrificed so much in pursuit of his dreams. But in that moment, staring down at the injured dog on the table, he realized something important. It wasn't about the grand designs or the next big thing. It was about the small things, the moments where kindness and compassion could make all the difference. Hours passed as the surgery went on, and eventually, the team emerged from the operating room. Elon stood anxiously, waiting for news. The lead veterinarian approached him, wiping his brow. "We've done what we can for now," he said, his voice soft but reassuring. "The next few hours will be critical, but we're hopeful." The dog's strong. Relief washed over Elon, but it was fleeting. The fight wasn't over. The dog still had a long road ahead of it, and so did he. The only thing that mattered now was that they had done everything they could. He sat down in the waiting area, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline that coursed through him. The tension hadn't completely eased, but the hope was there. He had done something meaningful, something that would stick with him forever. A life had been saved today, and it was more than just the dog that had been rescued. Something in Elon had shifted, and though he couldn't articulate it yet, he knew that this small act of kindness would echo far beyond the walls of this animal hospital. It was the beginning of something, and for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk felt the weight of responsibility. One that wasn't measured in dollars or innovation, but in the simple act of helping someone or something in need. The sun was low on the horizon as Elon Musk drove down the quiet highway, his mind swirling with thoughts that had little to do with the steel and rockets that usually consumed him. His hands gripped the wheel, but his focus was elsewhere, absorbed in the journey that now had nothing to do with business or technology, only the life of a dog that had come into his care. The dog, now wrapped in a soft blanket in the passenger seat, was breathing steadily, though the deep gashes and cuts still marked its once healthy frame. Elon had made the decision to take the dog to a nearby clinic, one that specialized in long-term care for animals recovering from trauma. He had already seen the first signs of recovery. The dog had stopped trembling. Its heart rate was steady, and it had opened its eyes to look at him earlier that morning. But the road ahead was still uncertain. As the car hummed along the road, Elon couldn't help but reflect on the strange journey that had led him here. A few days ago, his life was still revolving around his billion-dollar projects, his next big idea, and the relentless push to change the world. And now here he was, in a car with a recovering animal, racing against time to ensure it survived the second chance it had been given. His thoughts were interrupted as the dog shifted slightly, its eyes opening just enough to meet Elon's gaze. Elon's heart caught in his chest. It was the first time the dog had looked at him directly, and for a moment he felt a deep connection, something raw and powerful. "You're gonna be okay," Elon murmured, his voice full of a quiet promise. It was a strange feeling, this connection to a creature that had no language to speak, no understanding of the vast world of human ambition. Yet in that moment it was clear. The dog was showing signs of trusting him. The journey ahead was one of healing, both for the dog and for Elon himself. The drive to the clinic was a long one. Elon's mind wandered as the miles passed by, reflecting on the significance of what he had done. In his career, he had made tough decisions, navigated intricate challenges, and faced pressure that seemed unimaginable to most. But nothing had prepared him for the responsibility of caring for a life so fragile. The dog's recovery, he knew, would take time and patience, and not just from the dog, but from him as well. It was a reminder that there were battles in life that required persistence, even when the outcome was unclear. Arriving at the clinic, Elon stepped out of the car with the dog in his arms, cradling it gently against his chest. The staff greeted him with a mix of professionalism and empathy, ushering him inside. The head veterinarian, a calm woman in her late 40s, led him to an examination room where the dog would receive further care. Elon stayed close by, his eyes never leaving the dog's face. The dog's recovery was still uncertain, but the team of veterinarians moved with practiced efficiency, taking blood samples, rebandaging the wounds, and administering pain relief. It was a process that would take days, maybe even weeks, but Elon stayed with the dog every step of the way. As the hours passed, Elon found himself lost in thought. He was amazed by how much care went into the recovery of a life that seemed so small in comparison to the grand scale of the projects he normally dealt with. How many times in my life have I moved forward with ambition, blinded by the bigger picture, and ignored the small but profound moments that really matter? The longer he stayed in the clinic, the more he realized that his role here wasn't just about helping an animal. It was about a deeper, more fundamental understanding of compassion. In his world of rockets and technology, it was easy to forget the importance of simple, meaningful actions. But this moment, this act of rescuing the dog had shifted something inside of him. It wasn't about the prestige of solving the world's biggest problems. It was about what could be done in the here and now, for those in need. The dog, though still in pain, was showing small signs of improvement. It would eat a little, rest a little, and sometimes even lift its head to look at Elon. Every time the dog did, Elon felt a glimmer of hope. It was as though they were both learning to heal together. After several days, the dog had become stronger. Its wounds were slowly beginning to close, and the dark circles under its eyes faded into the more natural expression of recovery. Elon, on the other hand, had begun to feel the weight of the journey lifting. His constant presence at the clinic, his quiet conversations with the staff, and the small victories the dog experienced seemed to reaffirm his own growth. One afternoon, while the dog rested in a comfortable bed by his side, Elon found himself reflecting on a conversation he had had with the veterinarian. She had shared the challenges of their profession, of trying to save lives, often without a clear outcome. "It's a lot like life, isn't it?" she had said, her voice soft. "We make decisions every day. We take actions based on what we believe is best, and we just have to trust the process." Those words stuck with Elon, resonating deeply with his own experience. In his life, he had often been fixated on the next big leap, the next breakthrough, the next revolution. But what about the moments in between? The quiet, slow, and sometimes painstaking process of growth and recovery? Perhaps that was the most important lesson of all. Days turned into weeks and the dog's recovery continued. It was a slow, steady climb, one that required patience from both the animal and Elon. There were setbacks along the way, times when the dog's temperature spiked, when the medication didn't work as expected, or when it seemed like progress had stalled. But with every new challenge, Elon reminded himself that this, too, was part of the journey. The dog was finally allowed to leave the clinic after several weeks of recovery. It wasn't fully healed yet. Its scars remained, testament to its past, but it was stronger, healthier, and walking on its own. As Elon drove the dog back to his home, he couldn't help but smile. The road to recovery wasn't linear. There had been moments of uncertainty, of fear and doubt, but through it all, the dog had persevered, and so had he. The road stretched out in front of them, endless and full of possibility, and for the first time in a long while, Elon realized that the journey wasn't just about the destination. It was about the small, meaningful steps that were taken along the way. The dog, now sitting quietly in the passenger seat, looked up at him again, its eyes filled with gratitude, and Elon felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't sure what the future held for the dog or for himself. But one thing was clear: kindness, compassion, and perseverance had brought them this far, and that was a journey worth taking. The days following the dog's recovery felt different. For Elon Musk, it wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about everything that had unfolded since that fateful day on the side of the road. The dog, once a wounded creature, now walked alongside him with strength and vitality. But it was more than physical healing. It was the connection that had formed between them, a bond neither could have predicted. Elon spent more time at home now, his usual whirlwind of work and meetings quieting to make space for this new presence. The dog, who had once been a fragile, trembling figure, had transformed. Its fur had grown back, its eyes bright and clear, and it had learned to trust Elon completely. They spent long hours together, Elon reading, thinking, or simply sitting in silence, while the dog lay nearby, ever watchful and content. At first, Elon had thought the dog would simply be a chapter in his life, an act of kindness that would fade as the world moved forward. But as days turned into weeks, he realized something profound. The dog had become a part of him. not just as a pet or a rescued animal, but as a symbol of change, a living, breathing reminder of the power of compassion. One evening, as Elon sat at his desk, the dog curled up beside him. He found himself reflecting on the journey they had shared. He thought about the moment when he had first seen the dog on the side of the road. Broken and helpless, that moment had been an interruption in his busy life, a fleeting, inconsequential event to most people, but to him it had become a turning point. It had forced him to stop, to reconsider what mattered, and to face a decision that would have lasting impact. He had always prided himself on solving grand problems, on changing the course of history, but now he saw that the real change often happened in the quiet moments, in the simple acts of kindness that sometimes felt like distractions but were, in fact, the most important things. As he sat there in the dim light of his study, he watched the dog rest peacefully by his side. There was a warmth in his chest, a sense of fulfillment that came from knowing he had done something meaningful, not for the world, not for his companies, but for another life. The dog had needed him, and in the process, he had found something he didn't know he was missing, a sense of purpose that went beyond business and ambition. "Look at you," Elon murmured, his voice soft as he stroked the dog's head. "You're strong now. You've come so far, and so have I." The dog lifted its head slightly, its eyes locking with Elon's, as if understanding the weight of his words. Elon smiled, a quiet recognition passing between them. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a relationship. It was companionship, trust, and the silent understanding that passed between them. Elon hadn't realized how much this small, seemingly inconsequential act had changed him. It had disrupted his routines, forced him to step outside his world of tech and progress, and brought him face to face with a simpler yet deeper truth, that helping one life could be just as important as changing the world. In the weeks that followed, Elon found himself taking the dog on long walks, the two of them exploring the world together. The dog, now full of energy and vitality, would run ahead, pausing every so often to glance back, as though checking to make sure Elon was still there. Elon, for his part, would often stop to take in the surroundings, the trees, the open sky, the stillness of the world around him. It was a perspective he hadn't taken in years. It was in those moments that he realized how easy it was to lose sight of the small things, the moments of quiet beauty, when one is constantly consumed by the rush of life. One day, as they walked along a familiar trail, Elon stopped to watch the sunset. The orange and pink hues of the sky, reflected in the stillness of the lake in front of them. The dog sat beside him, its presence grounding, comforting. For the first time in a long time, Elon felt a deep sense of peace. This world isn't just about building rockets or sending humans to Mars. Elon thought to himself, it's about the little things too, the lives we touch, the kindness we show, and the connections we make along the way. The dog had taught him that. Through its resilience, its quiet acceptance, and its unwavering trust, the dog had shown Elon a different side of life. It had reminded him that success wasn't just about what you accomplish for yourself. It was about how you impact others, how you help those in need, and how you offer kindness, without expecting anything in return. In the quiet of that moment, Elon made a promise to himself. He would continue to change the world, but he would also make more space for the small acts of kindness, the ones that didn't get headlines or patents, but that made the world a better place nonetheless. The dog, now content and healthy, lay next to him, looking up at the vast open sky. In the dog's eyes, Elon saw not just gratitude, but a shared understanding, a bond forged not through words, but through experience. "Thank you," Elon whispered, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to the dog or to the universe itself. But as he looked down at the dog, he knew the answer. The journey they had shared was far more than a rescue. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the greatest transformations. And for Elon, that transformation had just begun. As Elon Musk stood by the window, looking out at the horizon, a soft breeze tugged at his hair. The world outside was bustling with energy, full of innovation, progress, and the constant hum of movement. But within him there was a calm that he had never known before, a stillness that came from an unlikely source. His encounter with the injured dog, the journey they had taken together, both in physical distance and in their emotional bond had taught him something profound. It was a lesson that reached beyond his busy life, beyond the world of high-stakes decisions and technological marvels. This lesson was about empathy, about the quiet power of kindness, and about how the smallest actions could ripple out into the world in ways that couldn't always be predicted. Elon had spent years building companies, revolutionizing industries, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But as his mind wandered back to the moment when he first saw the injured dog on the side of the road, he realized that none of those achievements had mattered as much as what he had done in that instant. In choosing to stop and choosing to care, he had experienced a transformation far greater than any scientific breakthrough. It wasn't that he had found the answers to the world's problems. It wasn't that the dog's recovery had solved anything monumental. But what he had learned from that experience had the power to change the way he viewed everything. The dog had been helpless, alone, and in pain, yet in its vulnerability, it had opened up a space for something much larger to take root, a space for compassion, for action, and for connection. Elon had realized that in helping the dog, he hadn't just saved a life. He had rediscovered his own humanity, his capacity for empathy, and the deeper purpose that lay beneath all the work he did. It was easy, especially in his world, to become caught up in the relentless pursuit of goals. The ambition to build, to innovate, and to lead had always been his driving force. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that true leadership wasn't just about changing the world in grand, sweeping gestures. It was about changing lives, sometimes in the smallest, quietest ways. As Elon reflected on the dog's recovery, on the trust they had built together, he began to see a connection to the broader picture of life. In the dog's struggle, he had witnessed the power of resilience. In its recovery, he had seen the strength of hope. And in their bond, he had learned that even the smallest actions could have lasting consequences. This was a lesson that transcended his busy, high-stakes life. The world didn't need more grand gestures. It needed more moments of kindness. It needed people who were willing to pause, to stop in the face of suffering, and to take action even when it was inconvenient, difficult, or uncertain. The dog had shown him that compassion wasn't just something we give to others. It was something that, in turn, gave back to us. In helping the dog, Elon had found a part of himself that had been buried under the weight of success and achievement. He had found the joy of simply giving, without expectation, and the profound impact it had not only on the recipient, but on himself as well. Elon had learned that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small the act might seem. In a world that often values speed, productivity, and success, it was easy to forget that true impact often comes from the quiet, unheralded moments. It came from the times when we chose to pause, to help, and to show kindness, even when the world around us was urging us to keep moving forward. The lesson he had learned from the dog was clear. Kindness and empathy were not just ideals, they were actions. They were choices we made every day in every interaction, and in every moment when we chose to reach out and help another soul. And sometimes those acts of kindness could change everything. They could change a life. They could change the course of a day, a week, or even a lifetime. Elon's thoughts turned back to the dog, now fully recovered and content, lying beside him on the couch. He thought about how their bond had deepened, how the dog had become not just a companion, but a symbol of everything he had rediscovered in himself. It wasn't just about saving a life. It was about learning to live with greater empathy, to lead with compassion, and to recognize the power of small moments. As he looked at the dog, Elon couldn't help but smile. This small act, this fleeting encounter, had been the catalyst for a profound shift in his life. And that, he realized, was the true power of kindness. It wasn't just about changing others. It was about changing yourself. For the audience watching, Elon's experience serves as a powerful reminder. We all have the opportunity to make a difference, to touch a life in ways we may never fully understand. We don't have to wait for a grand moment or a momentous event. The opportunities to act with kindness are all around us, often in the most unexpected of places. The dog, once a symbol of vulnerability, had become a living testament to the power of compassion and change. It had been through pain and suffering, but it had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected. And in the process, Elon had learned the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes the smallest actions can have the biggest impact on the world. As Elon mused on this, he knew that he would carry this lesson with him for the rest of his life. It would inform his decisions, his interactions, and the way he moved through the world. And in doing so, he hoped to inspire others to do the same, to embrace the power of kindness, to see the humanity in others, and to recognize that the smallest acts of compassion are often the ones that change the world in the most meaningful ways. And as he looked at the dog, who now wagged its tail happily, Elon couldn't help but feel grateful for the lesson he had learned, from an unexpected and unlikely source that had reshaped his perspective on life. As the story comes to a close, we reflect on the unexpected journey that Elon Musk embarked on, one that began with a single moment of kindness. In the midst of his busy, high-stakes life, he chose to stop and help a vulnerable dog in need. What followed was not just the dog's recovery, but a personal transformation for Elon, a shift in perspective that brought him closer to the core of what truly matters in life: compassion, empathy, and the impact of small acts of kindness. The journey they shared together, a story of rescue, healing, and newfound connection, reminds us all of how simple acts can change lives. It teaches us that we don't always need grand gestures to make a difference. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the small decisions that have the most profound impact. Elon's encounter with the dog is a powerful reminder that, in a world often focused on speed, success, and productivity, the greatest achievements come from the human connections we make along the way. This story has shown us that kindness is not only a gift to others, it is a gift to ourselves. When we choose to show compassion, we open ourselves to deeper understanding, greater empathy, and the possibility of positive change. Like Elon, we all have the power to make a difference, one small act at a time. If this story inspired you, reminded you of the importance of kindness, or touched your heart, we invite you to join us on this journey. By subscribing, you'll receive more heartwarming stories and lessons on how the smallest moments can change our lives and the world around us. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this.